Yo, what's going on? This is Peter A. Barry,
It's Ian Stonebrook.
and this is the Rated or Love It podcast, the podcast for high-level, great intellectuals that, like me and Ian, think everything in pop culture deserves to be rated on some sort of silly scale. So first off, Ian, how are you doing, my man?
Man, no complaints. Happy to be here. Excited to put on this playoff game afterwards.
No, for sure. So a lot of stuff's happened, you know, in the world, the critic world, the world where we're in, we jump in and out of. My boy Alphonse at Pitchfork, a friend of mine, he reviewed Chris Brown's new album, Brown, the one where he's dressed kind of like Michael Jackson on the cover. Yeah, he just won't let that comparison go, but it's his idol. But and he gave it a 1.3, which is just, as somebody who's written for Pitchfork, that's just an unfathomably low score. I've jumped around through the album. I was thinking it's more like a 4 out of 10, but I mean, it's, I would say I don't like the album. I might borderline hate the album. But, I'm not a huge Chris Brown fan. And, my boy Alphonse wrote a pretty compelling, a pretty hard to disagree with review. I don't know about the exact score, but Chris Brown fans were very angry. Because literally the tweet where they announced it was like, this Chris Brown album is a piece of shit, which was admittedly hilariously blunt. It's getting some backlash. The stands and the sea breezy diehards weren't going to let this go. I say, he said what he said. It's obviously kind of rude. I mean, hey, that's good music journalism, baby. But depending on how you look at it. But the real subject is I'm looking at the backlash. People are saying that he has some sort of bias. I saw some anti-Chris Brown bias. I saw someone saying that, because I guess he's allegedly from the island or something, and how that means he can't talk about Chris Brown, some weird diaspora war stuff going on. And I saw, there's the typical stuff where if you give somebody's favorite artist an unfavorable review or scathing review, you become the greatest threat to humanity since COVID-19. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm going to say, I hate this. I hate the discourse it's inspired. I don't really like the album. I don't like stands. I don't like online culture. I don't like how people are simplifying and being reductive when it comes to album reviews and not wanting to give, I guess, just on a fundamental level, just sort of misunderstanding the role of critics. So I hate the whole situation. I think I might hate the situation more than I hate his album, which I've jumped around. Yeah, I don't really like it. But what's your take on it, the whole situation?
Yeah, I'd say my whole take is I'm not mad at it. It definitely brought me up. When I was in high school and first became a Pitchfork reader, which is Rate It or Love It, probably the only music blog that I check every day, you know what I mean? Or strictly through a music lens. I remember they had the kind of similar viral moment when the rock band Jet, famous for Are You Gonna Be My Girl or whatever, I think released their sophomore album, and they didn't give it a score. They just posted a gif of a monkey pissing on itself and drinking its own pee, which was pretty hilarious to an 18-year-old like me or whatever. But I think that are we talking about it if it doesn't have that score, that reductive, sentence? Probably not. You know what I mean? If it's 4, it's probably came and went in terms of conversation for our lens of critique or whatever, respectfully. And Alphonse, I've never met him, but definitely one of my favorite writers. I think he said something actually that I thought was actually copied and pasted it, not to take as my own, but to credit him. And it said, but if I hadn't read Greg Tate's hilarious teardown of the racial sellout energy of Michael Jackson's Bad, which I don't know if you've read that before, but it's fantastic, or Dream Hampton's fierce op-ed on Dr. Dre's violence in hip-hop culture of misogyny, I would have never known that not everyone in the moment was buying what they're selling. And honestly, to me, that's the whole kind of crux of the piece. Even though I think, ironically, Chris Brown's an easy target, you know what I mean? Because he is polarizing. I mean, I've seen him live before. He's put on a fantastic show. You know what I mean? I can't take it away from that. I've actually got a buddy who, funny enough, went on a vacation with him, which sounds like a wild way to frame the actual situation, but said he was a hell of a guy, had a blast. So I said that all to say is I don't have anything personal against Chris Brown. I mean, I also don't think he's as good as Michael Jackson. Whether that's facts, perspective, or age, who's to say? But Yeah, it's a rough listen, you know what I mean? Like, I put it on, there's some decent stuff, but I think to me, like, the bigger a few thoughts. One, I heard Ethan Strauss make a really good point about because we live in an era where basically people of fame or no fame, whatever you may say, can kind of dunk back on a journalist.
Hmm.
It's journalism, and then it's made social media more reactive to responses because people want to hear, like, yo, that guy's a jackass, or this album sucks, or whatever else. So, like, I do credit Alphonse for like standing on how he feels. You know what I mean? Like, I do think like Pitchfork is a brand and the relevance. Obviously, some of it's going to be like, hey, like, we're going to go all the way there. You know what I mean? And we're going to position things provocatively because that's the name of the game. But I do think on the flip side that, like we said, like we are kind of in a creative bubble where commerce and formula has just like jumped the ship so much. It's like, I don't know. I wish I had the words right now, but like, I think it's much more the idea of Chris Brown in the system than like, yo, like, he has some great songs and some shitty ones like anybody else, or like he did something that um, was bad and, you know, people have either not gotten over it or he's had previous transgressions. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I guess that's not for me to say, but I think a lot more of the issue is just like how often are we going to rewrite or sanitize history? You know what I mean? Even for stuff that like in the scheme of shit ain't that important. I say that is like music, sports, those things are everything to me, but like they're not the history books. You know what I mean? And I think there is so much of revisionary history on people that we uphold that it's weird when there are people that are basically still relevant because they're bankable and they're making music merely because it's bankable that you can't say, well, all right, but I think that music sucks. So that's my 2 cents, I guess.
Yeah, no. I like what you said. When you say that you think it's the idea of Chris Brown in the system, I think like I got a bit because like I was trying to like admittedly I'm a little tired. I'm trying to process everything. But I feel like I get that point. Could you elaborate on that again? The idea of Chris Brown in the system that triggers something in
Yeah,
people.
no, absolutely. Because I think that kind of what Alfonso was saying is like the framing of every Chris Brown album is like, oh, will never forgive me, you know what I mean? Or everybody's against me and stuff like
Yeah.
that, which like, yo, if I was him, I might feel the same way. You know what I mean? I still remember like watching like the Matt Lauer interview on like the Today Show, like 2 years after it happened and he had an album coming out and they're like, showing the video or like, and it was just like, obviously Matt Lauer's come to be somebody not regarded in high taste or whatever, but like, I think it's fair to hold people accountable or things like that. I think there is an amount of grilling or frying that can be I don't know, just kind of shitty. I believe in forgiveness. You know what I mean? Even if I don't uphold anything that he's done of that regard. But so he exists in this odd space where there's always going to be a narrative of the system or media being against him because of his previous transgressions. And that maybe because of that, it has dimmed the light on like, yo, he's insanely talented. You know what I mean? Like he's, as Alfonso says many times, like he can do a backflip, which like sounds silly, but it's like this guy has more talent in his pinky finger than than I do in my whole body. You know what I mean? He's a superbly gifted talent. So on one hand, you have this like actually real, which I'm sure he lives tension of all people are trying to hold me down. But on the other hand, those same pseudo forces or whatever are giving you like beats from Diplo, you know what I mean? And like very formulaic, like tailor-made hits. And to me, the issue more is just like if you're leaning into I'm doing an album cover like Thriller, you know what I mean? Pull Heaven Forgive Me or whatever. I just like to see some actual creative risk. You know what I mean? Like other than like a bloated like 20 plus song album. And I'd say the same for Justin Timberlake. You know what I mean? I mean, ironically, it's the reason that people fuck with Bieber's new album is like he did take a risk. You know what I mean? And obviously there are artists that don't, our boy Harlow comes to mind that, maybe, you don't always land it, but I just as like a more general thought would be much more interested to see like, what's it sound like if Chris Brown, if he did an 8-track EP with all Metro, you know what I mean? Just like, what's a Justin Timberlake album produced by Tyler, the Creator sound like versus you're raging against this machine that's against you, but clearly you're still on it because you're doing the same Paint by Numbers albums as anybody else.
He's doing all his albums feel like data dumps to me. After like his first album, I had to do a deep dive for work and my own marketing job where I had to list all his albums and like from front to beginning to write up these little synopses, these little bio. They're really well written. I'll show it to you. But then another day, my name isn't on them. But and then I was like, wow. After like 2015, I was like, these albums really suck. He just started being in mixtape mode, loaded rapper mixtape mode, like 100% of the time. And it's like, bro, if you just made this 10 songs. As far as like the Chris Brown, as far as like his like transgressions and things, it's really not funny, but it is kind of funny. It kind of, I actually think, I don't want to use this. I think people would have eventually forgiven the Rihanna thing to some degree. He had I don't want to call it an excuse, but he had the bipolar stuff. He was like 19, 18, you know, but he just kind of keeps getting into some shit every few years,
Yeah.
back like I think as recently as like 2018, 2019, his ex-girlfriend Karuche Tran like had a restraining order against him. He was trying to threaten Amigos member Quavo. They were friends, but all of a sudden Quavo was trying to date Karuche. I think some people like accused him of rape. I think overseas. So, and I'm somebody, innocent until proven guilty. But it's a lot of, there is a good amount of smoke that makes. I just wonder why, he ends up in these situations so frequently. I think, and also he's apparently a mob Pyru blood. Like he calls himself Briz Breezy, which the other things he's done or allegedly done are so bad that I don't even care about that. I'll let him be a blood. I'm just like, yo, maybe we don't I guess leave, these things are always exist in a murky space. I don't believe in the whole guilty until proven innocent thing, which is very but I'll say it's been quite a bit. It's been quite a few instances since the Rihanna thing. So it's like, I don't know. But musically, I think I agree with you. I think I wish he wasn't doing the data dump formulaic mid 2010s late 2010s rapper thing with the mandatory features. I just think and I think the self mythology and the main character syndrome, which you're supposed to have as an artist, is leaking. His self victimizing is leaking into his lyrics a little too much. And I think some of those songs sound like they belong from 2014. Just think, I think if he could cut out some of the bloat and actually try something experimental, take a real risk, give us an 8-track EP, I think he'd be in a better place. And I think he's gone a few years without an incident, which isn't, he doesn't deserve a medal for that. But I think if he can go another few years without another incident and switch up his musical approach, I think he'll be in a better place. But we'll see.
Yeah.
For sure. What I'll say. So I guess the next thing I was wondering. So yeah, and for the record, yeah, I don't like the album. The backlash to I really like the album review. I really like the album review. Alphonse did a great job. Feels accurate. And I hate the backlash to the album review, just to clarify everything. So yeah, that's the take. Since
Well,
there's a lot
to
to
be
unpack.
fair, I was gonna say, to be fair, Alphonse was critical of the recent Clips album, you know what I mean? Which
Yeah, he
had
was. Yeah.
similar but different, backlash and stuff. So, I think that he probably gets a lot of not disdain just for going at, or not going at, but being critical of fan bases that have hives and also like the name on the front of the jersey. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people that right or wrong, or being deductive can be like Pitchfork is like the purveyor of being like, yeah, the new Nas album's a 5, but like the Waka Flocka Flame mixtape is a, 8.7, you know what I mean? Or whatever. Which like it might be because they might be like, hey, like the new Waka Flocka mixtape is actually like a new unbridled idea or whatever, where Nas has fallen into like a formula, you know what I mean? Or something of that nature. So like I personally think that's fair.
Hmm.
And I also want to say too, like, I'm also aware that like, that Chris Brown album is not for me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I can't, and I can't say, what he should do? Like, make him an album for me instead. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
that's what's going to be great for his life or career. Like, absolutely not. They're doing it for a reason. But I do think that, especially in pop music more than anything, and I think you could maybe put R&B and hip hop. And it's odd because what Chris is probably my age, he's probably 38. Like, I'm guessing, like, give or take a year.
Born in '89, so getting
Okay,
there.
yeah, so, yeah, he'd be 37, a year younger, theoretically, but, like, yo, hopefully he still has a lot of career ahead of him. Like I said, he still has life to, like, make up for his aggressions or make less mistakes. Like, nobody's perfect. I mean, shoot, if I was under the spotlight he is, I don't think I would have batted 1,000. But I do think it is interesting the idea of him, honestly, as a middle-aged artist, which is kind of like a nuts thing to say, but in the scheme of the game he plays, it's true because I think on one hand, I think Chris pays in real time for the sins of a lot of successful male R&B and pop singers before him who weren't really kind of, given the nail till later in their lives.
Mhm,
So I think that there is some kind of, don't want to group him with everybody who knows who I'm talking about, you know what I mean, or whatever. But I do
mhm,
think that he is judged up against their actions and also the fact that some of those guys were really damn good at making music.
mhm,
But I think too that there's like a larger problem to me in terms of one, artists reaching a certain point of safety, and two, a la like a Justin Timberlake. And to be fair, I think Chris Brown went number two. Like, I don't think JT even cracked the top 100 on his last album. So like clearly he's doing something that resonates. But the other thing is that when before the whole Diddy trial stuff, like when the Love album came out, my big thought was like, yo, like there's actually some good songs here. Like,
pretty good.
why don't you go back to the producer hat and like give this to Bryson Tiller, give this to Summer Walker, like somebody on the come up. Like, there's a certain point where I think we're all of the age or maturation where like, yo, you're not supposed to be in the limelight. You know what I mean? Or like, yo, I think the beats on Bully are quite good. I think the raps suck. You know what I mean? And like, if that is a all honestly insert blank any other rapper emerging, that's a cool album and I think a really good look for Kanye. So obviously Chris is a little bit more like the middle stage of his career based on, compared to the people that are 10 years older than him. But I just wish to your point that there's a more focused and risk taking approach.
No, for sure, definitely definitely want that. Probably won't happen as long as he keeps making all this money, but hey, let me see. I mean, yeah, so that's that on Chris Brown. And another thing is I wanna congratulate you on being absolutely fucking right about the verses with French Montana and Rick Ross. You mentioned that the idea that the low stakes that these guys like each other and there's no animosity there would kind of be a factor working against it, and you were absolutely right. They were performing songs together. They were playing each other the same song against each other or sharing song. It was weird. Afterwards, they did the radio interview talking about how they were brothers, and the Apple Music people, Ebro and them were just like, yeah, I feel like this was more like a celebration. And I was like, God damn it, Ian. Ian was kind of right on that one. He was cooking. He had the right
Well,
seasoning. I'm gonna say I still it was cool enough for me to say I didn't mind slash barely. Matter of fact, I want to hear what you have to say, and then I'll say what I have to say. But yeah, go ahead if you watched any of it.
Well, I didn't watch it. It's good to hear I was right. I don't hear that a lot in life anymore these days, so I appreciate that. No, I mean, I was able to land on the feeling or analogy, shortly after we recorded that I think summarized it, is it's like, yo, I love Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady. I don't care to see them play one-on-one. And if I do, even if I would like to see that at, their ripe age of, mid 40s or whatever, that's not a pay-per-view event.
Hmm.
And it is because it doesn't mean they weren't great. It doesn't mean that there's interest. It just means that there's no stakes and it's not that thing. You know what I mean? Like, whereas honestly, the flip side, like, yo, I'd watch Austin Rivers and Draymond Green when I won for sure. Like, they're maybe, cumulatively not as talented as the guys that are buddies, but the guys are buddies. So it's just not the thing if that's the thing. Yeah, I don't it feels like running out of ideas. It doesn't mean I don't like those guys as artists, but I to frame it as a competition or this heavyweight fight, man, I'm not really feeling it.
I must say I didn't like it. I didn't hate it. I didn't strongly dislike it. I just didn't particularly like it. It was cool to see them perform some of the songs, but it just wasn't. They also didn't play like I don't think Rick Ross played me. I don't think he played "Hold Me Back."
Well,
Hold up, did he?
to be fair, Ross has a lot of records, you know what I mean? Like, he's gonna leave some
Yeah,
table. But I mean, is the aside from just like it being like a payday, like, sellable event or whatever, are they touring together afterwards? Like, was the to go back to the kind of formula shit where people like, yo, this can be our I mean, obviously nothing's gonna be locks and dipset, you know what I mean? But like this is the catalyzing event for a tour, an album, or whatever. Which, yo, to be fair, I won't be mad at either of those things. I just think that a versus is, oh man, for what, you know?
Wasn't yeah, it was yeah, and I'm sorry, I had to look this back. Yeah, he didn't play Hold Me Back. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Like no, and yeah, it was very like no, I still can't believe that to me. And I mean, no, he left some things on the table. That was one of them. I'm like, yeah, I completely I mean, yeah, man. I wish I wanted it to be this fire. I don't know what I was expecting. It wasn't quite what I expected. I should have expected that. Yeah, I guess this isn't a win or loss thing, but this is I don't like it. Doesn't sound like I'm sure you like that they won. I mean, you like that you got this win.
Only because I ain't critical much. The rare time that the opening was just like, oh, this actually is something I don't like. I'll take that small victory. Shit, I'd rather be wrong. I'd rather be the best versus ever and eat crow. You know what I mean? I don't got to be right all the time. I'd rather people have a good time. I just kind of had called that when I saw it.
That's you. All right, so I mean, Iceman is now, and we'll talk about Iceman next week after it drops. But I mean, the Iceman is coming this Friday. No singles really, or maybe like one kind of, but last summer. But I mean, how are you feeling about the rollout? He had the iced out seats at the Toronto Raptors playoff game. He had the massive ice structure in Toronto where fans had to wait until it melted to see when the release date was, and the cops had to break it up, and you know, and then he had these live stream sessions premiering parts of the songs last year, parts of Iceman, allegedly parts of Iceman. He was driving around an ice truck. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I kind of love the rollout, honestly. Other than maybe I wish I'd gotten a more like definitive single, but I mean, I was really kind of fucking with this rollout, man. I think it was pretty imaginative, and it's pretty cool to see that like once you get to Drake's stature, it's like you don't really have to do anything. You just drop the album. You don't have to do anything. But I like that he driving around a ice truck is hilarious to me. The ice structure, ice seas, all that's very fun to me in sort of a silly, whimsical way. The live stream was kind of experiential, kind of cool. All of those kind of experiential, sort of interactive. It's I remember when him and 21 Savage for their album a few years, like 4 years ago, they did like these fake interviews, which you could
Oh yeah,
argue maybe kind of a spit in the face of journalism because they didn't do a real interview. But also, like, I respect a good troll. I thought it was pretty.
yeah. I love that. I thought it was great.
I like the album, great rollout. But yeah, I think I kind of love this Iceman rollout. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the like and love. I'll say like. You know what I mean? I think that I like that it's imaginative. It's like youthful or like parasocial in a way that doesn't feel like, I don't know, like maybe kind of like gross. You know what I mean? Like which some of the kind of like steak streams or whatever have felt like leans a little that way. Like it feels youthful and new without chasing youthful or new. And that's
Mhm.
obviously been the kind of peril of Drake and a lot of rappers once they get to the age that I'm at, you know what I mean? Or whatever is kind of, trying to be like, hey, fellow kids. I think my only critique is just that you could still say, like, is anything substantive come out of it? You know what I mean? Like, I did think What Did I Miss was good. Didn't really listen to the Central C record like that, so I can't quite call it. But I do think it's smart to be like, he clearly gets like, hey, I have to build intrigue and momentum in kind of even newer media platforms or like street level stuff because just dropping the music or just doing like and granted like I don't know if anything was going to stick after the immediate Kendrick fallout even though I'm a Family Matters defender. I think that Drake did much better in the beef than a lot of people give him credit for. But like he had the song with Thug that was good, like he had like all the archival like video drops or whatever, and none of that really stuck. So I think to do something slow building, kind of immersive, kind of head turning, and also being like he's never had the like Jay-Z or Michael Jackson discipline to like totally vanish. but I think this is as close as he can get to that, and, I mean, I think rollout-wise, he nailed it.
No, yeah, I agree, and I agree with that. And I think the pursuit of an explosive game in today's fragmented, oversaturated media and social media musical landscape, I feel like that can be faulty. I feel like it's like a kind of a faulty approach because it's almost like trying to hijack the offense and trying to go for 60 points like it's like you're Kobe in his last game, you know?
Yeah.
Except the defense is just an impenetrable phalanx of chance and luck and you know bots and agendas and you know fickle fans and attention spans. It's a pretty fearsome defender collectively. But I think so with that in mind, I think you know, I think you're right. It was good for him to go for like a clean 30, get 8 points this quarter, you know, 10 points this quarter, chill out third quarter, get a quick 6 points at the end of the third quarter. Then fourth quarter, get out a closing jumper. You know, just put on the closing 12 points or however many points, get to 30, 33, 34, and just put on the clinic and some quick jumpers when you need to, sort of like 98 MJ, you know, just sort of pacing himself like an Emmett Smith rather than being like a Barry Sanders. Just no, you don't know. You don't need to go for 60 right now. Play in the triangle and get your points to the flow of the offense, you know, and you can still have that gears. That's kind of how I saw this rollout. But I mean, it's sort of like, I guess that's for the rollout, but ultimately, in a way, the rollout's kind of like the first three quarters, maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I should treat it like, but I mean, on another note, you know, I'm keeping with the basket, you know, the rollout was really good, but I mean, I was telling a reporter today, like, I think this is a Drizzy Drake legacy game. Iceman. I think Iceman is absolutely a legacy game, and I think he absolutely cares about this. And I think, you know, I'm kind of a jaded Drake fan. My rap column is Stereo Gum's named after one of his songs, "Say Was Real," which I heard when I was like 17 years old. It was mind blown.
Yeah.
But you know, I think he's let me down a lot with this lawsuit, more so than even the loss against Kendrick. Let me down by supporting Aiden Ross, let me down by talking shit about Megan Thee Stallion. But even with all that, I hope that he comes through. I'm hoping that this is his LeBron James against the Celtics game 6, or whatever game that was, when he gets 45 points, 15 assists, 15 rebounds and 5 assists, you know. I hope he just comes out right from the beginning and is rapping his ass off and reminds people why he was considered the best rapper of his generation for different times. But I mean, that's sort of a separate topic rollout. But I mean, up to now, the rollout's been good. Now he's got to deliver on the music.
Yeah,
So
when, to your point, like, even on the basketball analogy or whatever, like cleanliness, been a very ethical rollout. You know what I mean? Like, there's in this attention economy, especially considering like the way his name's been dragged and like, his affinity to kind of feed into like pettiness and stuff like that. Unless he had a hand in Kendrick music like disappearing on streaming for like, 8 hours or whatever the hell happened there. And even then, like I'd say, "Oh, that's kind of savvy, you know what I mean?" But
mhm.
like it hasn't been, you know, it hasn't been like, thinking of like Missy Elliott, like gossip folk stuff. You know what I mean? Like he's not like, putting his name in rumors per se, or like, I don't know, posting thirst traps, or like even doing like cryptic lyrics about, like captions or whatever, that, like read like subs. Like, and I wouldn't even say any of that stuff would be bad or out of bounds or whatever, like, and even too, like everybody knew what was coming on, Super Bowl Sunday a couple years back. Maybe a younger, more defensive Drake would have been like, I'm going to drop something that day. You know what I mean? Just to like, make a splash or kind of play like, kind of play the okey doke or whatever. Man, he hasn't done any of that. That doesn't mean I don't expect that type of energy on the album, but it's been I mean, yeah, it's been a rollout that signals, I'd say, patience and maturity, and also maybe a different lens on who his audience is. You know what I mean? Toronto very holistically, and like the online streamer, kind of new age kid or whatever. So yeah, we'll see if the music follows.
You know, shout out to Drake for not flopping on these, not foul baiting, you know, flopping with his album rollout. Now we just have to hope that the album itself doesn't flop critically at
Very
least.
true. Yeah.
No, but
Can't wait.
yeah, no, for sure. I'm definitely looking forward to it. So touch us. Did you see the Kevin Hart roast? I watched it, and
Man, I mean, that thing was about as long as,
yeah,
Moses' Ten Commandments movie. So I'm writing is it Regina Hall? Was that the name of the gal from Scary Movie?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I got cut off in there. I had to like go back to writing something. But yeah, about 2/3 of the way.
Yeah, I saw a lot of it, and then I jumped around and saw the rest of the clips. There was some, comedy pretty. I liked it. I mean, I just think the comedians there were pretty good. I think Shane Gillis, funny guy. I
Yeah.
think he pushes the boundaries a little bit. Be a little uncomfortable at times. I mean, funny guy. I thought he did well, like hosting it. I love Chelsea Handler, Tom Brady. I mean, I loved everyone I saw. It was Naeem's good. Jeff Ross was even pretty good. What I didn't like was somebody made a George Floyd joke, and I was like,
Yeah. The Kill Tony dude, yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, you know what? You can leave that one at home, bro. I don't. You can leave
Yeah.
that. I didn't like that. That docked it like a point. And I understand comedy would be risky, but I just feel like for some of these people, like they just, I don't know. I just feel like that's a pretty clear cut one. Like I don't know. I feel like you can leave that one at home. I didn't think they had to make it. I think some of them made jokes or a little. I was just like, all right, bro. Like I get it. Like black, yeah, whatever. Yeah, we can't. But I don't know. I would have left the George Floyd thing at home, but I mean, otherwise, it was also a little bit long for me. Like, it was a slog to get through. I had to watch over a couple days, but then I had to watch the clips. But I mean, I like it. I hated that George Floyd joke. There's a couple others I didn't love, but whatever. I I hated the George Floyd joke, but I liked the roast all the time. I think, the funny thing is I saw the Cat Williams and Kevin Hart, I guess them apparently squashing their beef. I can't help but wonder if like that was something they discussed before, if it was like a spur of the moment thing, or if it was like, or if Cat Williams even truly accepts it, or if like it was just on camera and he's just like, I mean, I'm not going to destroy this heartwarming moment. But I mean, the ambiguity there, maybe that just means there really is a tension there that still needs to get worked out. At least they're trying, which I guess is good on its own merit. But that's more of a curiosity I have more than anything bad or good. But I liked it overall. But now what's your take?
I'd say just about the same. I mean, one is too long for me to get all the way through. So there's that. I really did like it. Man, I think it kind of says it all that we both say we hate the George Floyd joke, and that all we can say is the George Floyd joke is it wasn't near and funny enough to have a punchline for us to remember what the joke was. You know what I mean? And like, I mean, obviously, I know comedy is kind of like, hey, who, especially roast, like, who can outdo who in terms of shock value and taking it there. And I mean, they're talking about, gal's husband jumping off, a cliff, people's body counts, people's parents, people's kids. Like, they went everywhere. It was bare knuckle boxing, you know what I mean, for every, everybody, whatever. But it felt like the intent was more to like kind of like trigger a base or like go viral of like, I can't believe you said that or whatever, versus like a joke that I don't know. I mean, ain't the thing still to make people laugh? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I thought that was kind of like, I know everybody's trying to see how close they can get to the line or push it or whatever, but if the reaction isn't a laughter, I mean, it's the same as like, well, forgive me, it's not the same, but it's a similar, maybe like what scale are we judging this on? Is like when I heard like Bomani Jones critiquing the latest Jamie Foxx stand up, which I love Jamie Foxx historically. I haven't seen this or whatever, but like when you're looking for applause rather than laughter, like, that's not what we're really here for. You know what I mean? So like if you're looking for this guy,
Yeah.
so like, doesn't, and I do think that is one of the interesting things of that show is like, clearly, or not the Kill Tony show, the roast. Clearly, there are people on stage that may or may not have real beef, you know what I mean? And are, edging or skewing the lines of, I want to put so and so in their place, but I can't let my emotions get the best of me because once you do, it ain't really funny.
Hmm.
But that these people that theoretically associate or relate to different bases or pander even to can honestly all get along based on the craft. You know what I mean? And this like so that I respect. Like I said, I just didn't think the George Floyd choke was crafty.
Yeah, like, you would've it's one of those things where, like, you that shit better be the funniest shit of all time. You know, like,
Right.
the risk versus the reward is so high, like, I've laughed at some terrible, evil things, like, even within that special, like, making fun of somebody's husband who committed suicide. I had to look it up. I was like, "Yo, he really did commit suicide." That's probably that's too much for me, so but I mean, yeah, I think that's my take. But no, I agree with you, and that doesn't mean that guy's a bad guy. It's, anyone can make a bad joke or, just but, didn't love it.
I think it shows too, and I mean, maybe, comedians are cut from such a different cloth that they're immune to all the other perils of fame, awareness, consciousness as anybody else. But it kind of strikes me as I think he's somebody that had like a pretty strong following, you know what I mean? And is like, a comedian with a niche, a lane, an angle, or whatever. But like, if you're mostly famous for being infamous and it's, that and like the Puerto Rico joke or whatever, are you kind of falling for the drug of attention too much and just like, hey, what's gonna get me, like clickbaiting his jokes, rage baiting his jokes. And I just like, man, rage baiting's fucked up the news, it's messed up album reviews, it's messed up, it's messed up basketball, whatever. Let's not ruin comedy. But just my take.
No, no, for sure. Definitely get it. One other thing, this would be a super quick round. I don't know if you saw it. I saw some of Cameron Boozer's NBA combine, and I think I like it. He measured. I don't know how much you watched at college this year, but he was like kind of historically dominant. If it wasn't for that errant pass from his brother, who God bless him, totally fluky miracle play.
Yeah, it's nuts.
But I don't know how familiar you are with measurements, but Cameron Boozer, I've had my friend on Twitter, Might of Milk or whatever, I talked to him, another basketball nerd from a basketball forum I know. We used to talk about who was a better prospect between he and Cameron Boozer and Cooper Flag. And I saw how dominant Cameron Boozer was in high school and college, but to me, he just doesn't seem something about the way his build is and the way he moves, it just screams undersized power forward, and like that doesn't seem like he's particularly agile, even though well, I'll get to that part. And he just doesn't it screams like a little bit of not bust. I think he's such a high IQ player, he'll be good. Probably an all-star at worst, but we'll see. But no, I looked at some of his measurements. He measured in at 6'8" and a quarter without shoes, and a 9-foot standing reach. For reference, LeBron James came into the league at 6'7" and a quarter, 240 pounds, 8'10" standing reach, 7-foot wingspan. Cameron, so if you're 6'8" without shoes with a 9-foot standing reach, you're basically 6'10". So no, I think his reach, everything is fine. He had he had a pretty good lane agility time. I think it was better than a few other top prospects. He had a very solid one-step vertical leap at 35 inches for context. Blake Griffin has like an 8'9" standing reach. He had 35.5-inch vertical. So Cameron, it looks like he has the ability to play about 3 feet above the rim or 2 feet above the rim, whatever. And he shot like 19 of 25. He had some absurd like shooting drill numbers that, only corroborated his elite shooting numbers in college. That combined with the IQ, I like what he did at this combine. Nothing really. He had a decent measurements all around. Good height, good wingspan, good reach, good vertical, pretty good agility test, other stuff. I still have just my eye test on him. It might be just something about him. I'm not totally won over that he's number one or anything, but I think his measurements helped him a little bit. I think he had a good combine. He shot the ball well. I'm going with I like it. I like his combine performance. What about you?
Yeah, I'd say I like it too. I mean, I think that on one hand, there's some study that basically like anybody that is the son of an NBA player, you should draft them 6 spots higher than they're evaluated. Cause like that's how they like end up measuring out or whatever. So, by that nature, like, Cameron Boozer should be like the -2 pick in this draft. You know what I mean? He should be the, anonymous or pardon me, unanimous rather number one. I think that he is the safest guy. You know what I mean? I think all things considered of the top four, like, and also safe in a way that's like not super sexy. So it's a little hard to be like, oh, hey, this is gonna, fill the seat, sell jerseys, things like that. I think my biggest question with him, and it's your point, is like if you are a prototypical power forward in today's game, like where are you playing and what space are you occupying? Like, or to the, kind of like, Bill Simmons, I think sometimes around Russillo makes this comp like, where would you be right now in a playoff series? You know what I mean? So like theoretically, if he was with the Spurs, like yeah, there's a chance he could start for the Spurs in the Champagne or, or in the, Carter Bryant, like, bench minute spots. But and it would be nice to have a body like him to guard Julius Randle or guard Naz Reid. I think that I just don't know. It seems like if you're not like a five tool center or just like freak athlete rim protector, it feels very hard to be a back to the basket guy between the height of 6'8" and 6'10 that isn't either Blake Griffin athletic or Naz Reid stretch the floor, you know? Tyler Hansbrough struggled. Jared Stullinger struggled. You know what I mean? These were all guys, Dwan Blair's smaller. He had a nice little run for a minute. If you're not entirely imposing, like, is offense going to be ran through you or for you? And I think he's smart enough to be ran through to a degree, or at least as like a hub on a second unit to start, or just like a high IQ connector. But is that motor going to make him like effective in the margins? Which I think it will. You know what I mean? Like I think he's going to be good, but it's it's like a silly way to put it, but like if the ceiling's Tim Duncan, that's pretty insane ceiling, you know what I mean? And obviously Tim was, considerably bigger and also like clear cut number one, like all 4 years, like, or by the time he was, a junior, and eventually a senior graduating out of college, if there's probably maybe just on like the non-sexy upside, a little bit of like Evan Mobley, who
Right.
like honestly, I was probably just like, hey, I just don't think this guy seems as cool as the other guys, so I'm not high on him. He had a great rookie year. It's been kind of flat since. So I mean, I'm rooting for Boozer, but I do think that because he seems well rounded and he seems like a force of will, I think it's gonna come down to like being in the right system. You know what I mean? Like it's a shame the Pacers lost their pick because if he was to fall into a place where he could just fall into place and be additive, I think the sky's the limit. But if you're trying to make him the franchise guy year round, I just think you're going to have trouble with the size and pace of NBA. And that's not just him. I think that's anybody.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like he knocked down 39% of his threes this year, but it was only 3.6 attempts. I think he'll be a good shooter. It's just difficult, man. These guys, I remember as far as measurements go, I remember who was the last gymmer? He had a better combine than people thought he was gonna have. He had a better vertical, better agility time than people thought. He just couldn't stick it in the NBA. Great player overseas or wherever he is, but I
Yeah.
mean, I
USA
don't think
Grand Prix as well.
I don't think Boozer is gonna be that. But I mean, well, point blank, I mean, who do you like more today? Cameron Boozer or Cooper Flag? Who's gonna be the better player in 5 years?
Flag, but Cooper's an interesting one too, where it's like, I don't know if anybody, I mean, I'm sure some people know, there's a lot of people smarter than me, but like that he was going to be kind of this downhill Swiss Army knife, I just don't think Boozer's as fluid or gifted in that way. You know what I mean? But like to like the versus like the Jimmer, standpoint or whatever is, I think Jimmer's main issue is just couldn't guard anybody. You know what I mean? Like, which is, and then unless you're getting the allowance to shoot at volume, which, yeah, maybe he had a chance. And if he was born 5, 10 years later and it's a different story, I imagine that is what cost him a career in the NBA. I think Cameron Boozer is going to be able to guard people. You know what I
I
mean?
think, yeah.
I just don't know, like, literally what space on the floor he's going to occupy in an NBA offense just because I don't think anybody's sitting on that block. I think he's a good decision maker out of his short roll and stuff like that. He's probably not physically imposing to be a hub like Hardenstein. You know what I mean? And it would seem like a disservice to his gifts to be like, yo, just be a stretch four and stay out there. You know what I mean? So like maybe he's like a twitchier Jaren Jackson. You know what I mean? I don't know, but I think that it just is going to have a lot to do with fit. You know what I mean? Like going to the right place where he's, He's got a smart point guard, you know what I mean? And he can pick his spots.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, and I don't know why he his measurements aren't that far from Kevin Love's, is what I'm gonna say.
Hmm,
And like both of them, Kevin Love actually pretty fast in a straight line. I remember one
for
time I
sure.
saw him, I was like, wow. And he's got 35-inch vertical too. And he could stretch the ball. He was a high IQ player too. And not as his Karen Boozer. I don't know. Yeah, I think as far as the Cooper comparison, I was very, like I said, like 2023, 2024, whatever it was. I told my boy, I just think Cooper Flag is a more fluid athlete than Cameron. Think the ability to, and I always saw him as sort of like a rich man's Jimmy Butler at his best, which in a way that Cooper is sort of very
Yeah.
scalable. He can be a hustle player, Swiss Army knife that can guard four positions, but he can also be I think he'll also be able to be a number one option scorer on a playoff team. But I also think he could be, because he's so good at cutting, and I think his transition ability, his ability to eventually, through all that and initiate offense, I think he could be a good second option. I think he'd be a third option, fourth option. I think his transition and his reach, and is a little bit more size than Jimmy, gives him more of a gear in transition. I think he's got a deceptively high IQ to the point where he can just make high level plays even when he's not looking to score. And I think he's got more advanced imagination and fluidity than Jimmy Butler. So that's kind of what I've always seen from Cooper Flag. That's kind of what I saw this year. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens with Cam. But yeah, I'll say I liked his, either strongly liked, or I liked his comeback. I loved his year at Duke, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm right with you though as far as the questions.
Yeah,
Right.
one, I think two, I mean, one, obviously like Kevin Love in his era, whatever, like they were running post ups for him. You know what I mean? It was a more
Yeah.
half court game and stuff like that. I think, when you talk about ceiling, like, forgive me if I'm just drawing a blank off top of mind, but there really aren't a lot of first option, like number one guy power forwards in the NBA. I would argue that all the people that are air quotes classified as power forwards and now in the NBA, or the really good ones, are really just small forwards playing a small ball game. You know what I mean? Like, I think Pascal Siakam is much more a small forward than a power forward, but he's a four in today's game. Jason Tatum, you could say the same thing. LeBron, give or take. So I don't ever really see Cooper even being like, or I'm sorry, not Cooper, Cam being like Paolo dynamic. You know what I mean? Like, I could be wrong, but like there would have to be a reset back to a little bit more back to the basket stuff, I would guess. But to the point too, I mean, like, look, people have their questions about Derek Queen, who's a different player than Cam Boozer, but also like a high IQ guy. He had a killer rookie year. You know what I mean? Off IQ and a different approach. Like Cam is not Zion. Zion also there's something to be said about being a glitch in the matrix. You know what I mean? And having a different approach to the game. And then, I mean, is there a world where Cam Boozer could be like, maybe less athletically gifted, higher tooled coming into it. Aaron Gordon,
Yeah.
not a bad pro at all. Like there are different ways he could be molded. I just think that it's like, and it really matters being in the right place. Because if he's, on a Land of Misfit Toys team with a bunch of, guards who don't want to give him the ball or spacing, that sucks. Like, it's going to be bad for him like it'd be bad for anybody. But he's in the right spot, it could really pop.
Agreed. I think I love the Aaron Gordon comparison. Honestly, if Aaron Gordon could get 22 points a game on like 61 true shooting percentage, you know what I mean? That's probably a top 12 player, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Aaron Gordon's unique because he's somebody who they kind of in Orlando wanted to make in terms of like a more ball dominant downhill small forward, but he never quite had like the handler fluidity to do that at like an elite NBA level. And ironically, when they made him like a dunker spot guy in Denver, like everything else came together. You know what I mean? He shoots the shit out of the ball now. Like, he's still a great finisher. He's a hell of a defender. So, he had a interesting trajectory to get where he got, but I wonder just who GMs are looking at as like the kind of model or mold to put Boozer in.
Exactly. No, I definitely agree. Yeah, so no, I definitely agree. So like all that. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I think that about wraps it up, man. Guys, thanks for tuning in to the latest edition of Ready to Love It. I'm assuming we'll be back in a few days with more, maybe some Drake thoughts. maybe some more NBA playoff and draft thoughts. You know, we're gonna keep it locked in. We're doing, I think this is episode 3 so far.
Sounds about right. 3 or 4. I think 3.
Yeah, I think it's 3. I'll edit this out if we're wrong, but we're sticking to it, man. We'll see. Anyway, thanks everyone. Thanks for tapping in. Check out for next episode.
Appreciate it.
Great talking to you, Ian.